You want to talk about law and order? Law and order for who? For whose benefit? Because it wasn't law and order when peaceful immigrants were met with rubber bullets in Los Angeles. It wasn't law when black girls get dragged out of classrooms. Where are you when immigrants get dumped at bus stops in the middle of the night? In a recent live televised panel that has quickly become the centerpiece of national discourse, Representative Jasmine Crockett ignited a political firestorm that few could have anticipated. The cameras hadn't even cooled down before the internet caught ablaze. Sitting across from California Governor Gavin Newsom, Crockett tore through the facade of unity and civility often paraded during these high-profile events. But this wasn't some staged partisan skirmish or a rehearsed performance aimed at soundbites. This was a full-throttle, no-holds-barred confrontation aimed at peeling back the carefully constructed image of a man many had pegged as a future Democratic presidential nominee. Her words were thunderous and unrelenting. "Trump's not the problem. You are." It was a moment so raw, so jarring, that it left not just the audience, but millions across the nation, stunned in silence. What made this encounter even more explosive was that Crockett wasn't defending Trump, far from it. She was issuing a stark indictment of the systemic failures perpetuated even by those who claim to stand for progress. And in that moment, everything changed. The venue was a high-profile policy roundtable, set in a sleek studio with a national broadcast that promised to address the most urgent crises facing America today: housing affordability, policing, immigration reform, and the ever-widening gap between rhetoric and reality were all on the docket. The room was filled with journalists, analysts, politicians, and an audience that spanned ideologies and identities. While the producers likely expected a sharp, yet civil dialogue between ideological allies, what they got was a political reckoning that shook the foundations of performative liberalism. Governor Gavin Newsom entered the conversation with his usual polished charm, confident in his record and unfazed by scrutiny. He touted California's progress on climate policy, public health leadership during COVID-19, and his administration's resistance to Trump-era rollbacks. But what he failed to mention, or tried to bury under buzzwords, was the deep dissatisfaction festering among everyday Californians. That miscalculation became evident the moment Jasmine Crockett took the floor. She began calmly, but with purpose. She acknowledged the importance of resisting right-wing extremism but refused to allow that battle cry to be used as a scapegoat for the failures of Democratic leadership itself. "It's too easy to point at Trump and say, he's the villain," Crockett said. "But what about the rot inside our own walls?" As the cameras zoomed in, the tension between Crockett and Newsom crackled in the air. She pointed out that homelessness had skyrocketed in California despite billions being allocated to address the issue. Families were living in tents outside luxury tech campuses. Children were attending school hungry. And those living paycheck to paycheck had grown weary of being told to be patient, while elites at the top hosted $10,000 plate fundraisers. Crockett's voice sharpened as she asked, "How can you call yourself a progressive leader when the people in your state can't afford to live, breathe, or survive?" Newsom attempted to respond with measured language, citing statistics and long-term strategic plans, but the more he spoke, the more detached he appeared. He spoke of investments, public-private partnerships, and bureaucratic timelines. Crockett countered with lived experiences. She spoke of mothers forced to choose between medicine and groceries, of teachers moonlighting as Uber drivers, of neighborhoods that hadn't seen a meaningful infrastructure upgrade in decades. "You don't get to call that progress," she said flatly. "You get to call that privilege." The confrontation escalated as the subject turned to policing and the recent controversial use of force in major California cities. Crockett's anger surfaced fully. "You want to talk about law and order?" she asked, staring directly into Newsom's eyes. "Law and order for who? For whose benefit? Because it wasn't law and order when peaceful immigrants were met with rubber bullets in Los Angeles. It wasn't law and order when unhoused folks were brutalized in Venice Beach. And it sure as hell wasn't law and order when black teenagers were pinned to the ground for curfew violations." Her voice shook not with emotion but with righteous fury. "Don't come to me with numbers when your policies are bleeding people dry." As the moderator tried to cool the tension, asking the panel to keep things constructive, Crockett wasn't having it. She knew exactly what that phrase meant. It meant watering down truth to protect those in power. It meant silencing uncomfortable voices under the guise of decorum. She continued, undeterred, "I'm not here to be polite. I'm here because our people are dying. They're dying from poverty, from policing, from policy failure. And until we confront that, not in press releases, but face to face, nothing changes." Newsom attempted once again to frame the issue as part of a broader national crisis, calling Trumpism a toxic tide that continues to threaten the nation's democratic institutions. "This is bigger than California," he said. "This is about preserving our democracy from authoritarian creep." But Crockett snapped back. "Then stop acting like Trump is the only authoritarian in the room. Because when people in your state are being surveilled, evicted, silenced, and stripped of dignity, you don't get to blame a man who's not even in office anymore." that's on you. The audience had grown silent, captivated by the sheer gravity of the moment. No spin, no fluff, no consultant-approved talking points could save Newsom now. Crockett wasn't just dismantling his argument, she was exposing a national pattern of selective accountability. She spoke of children being held in detention centers even after executive orders claimed to have ended the practice. She pointed out that despite public promises, corporate landlords continued to displace low-income renters under Newsom's nose. And when Newsom tried to say that these issues are complex, Crockett countered, "They're not complex to the people living them, they're just cruel." At this point, it wasn't just Crockett versus Newsom, it was Crockett versus every sanitized, poll-tested, photo-op-driven facade of Democratic leadership that had let down the very communities it promised to uplift. The viral moment came when Crockett leaned in, looked Newsom dead in the eyes, and said, "Trump didn't tell you to greenlight more oil permits. Trump didn't force you to let Google and Apple buy up whole neighborhoods while single moms sleep in their cars. Trump didn't make you ignore farm workers choking on wildfire smoke with no protective gear. That's not Trump's legacy, that's yours." The room erupted into nervous murmurs. Newsom sat back, stunned into silence. The moderator scrambled to regain control of the segment, but it was too late. The truth had detonated, and there was no stuffing it back into a polite narrative. Within minutes, hashtags like hashtag Jasmine Crockett Truth, hashtag Not Trump You, and hashtag Newsom Exposed began trending across social platforms. Liberal and conservative commentators alike replayed the exchange on loop, dissecting every word. Some applauded Crockett for her courage, others accused her of betraying party unity, but no one could deny she had struck a nerve, and struck it hard. In the aftermath, political analysts scrambled to recalibrate. Newsom's camp released a vague statement about healthy discourse, while quietly canceling upcoming interviews. Meanwhile, Crockett's team was inundated with interview requests, endorsements, and messages of solidarity, but she wasn't celebrating. She was already talking about how to translate that moment into momentum, how to ensure her words didn't become just another viral clip, but the start of a broader reckoning. For days, the story dominated headlines. Editorials in the New York Times, The Atlantic, and even Fox News debated the implications. Was Crockett fracturing the Democratic coalition at a critical time, or was she rescuing it from its own inertia? In coffee shops, union halls, and college campuses, ordinary people quoted her words, "Trump's not the problem, you are." The sentence became a cultural flashpoint, not because it gave Trump a pass, but because it made clear that no one gets a free ride anymore, not even those who claim to be on the side of justice. In the weeks that followed, pressure mounted on Newsom's administration to take real action. Crockett had introduced a new bill aimed at redirecting federal and state emergency funds to protect renters at risk of eviction in high-cost cities like San Francisco and Oakland. She worked with grassroots organizations to schedule public forums addressing police accountability, especially in cities like Sacramento and San Diego where incidents of brutality had gone largely ignored. More importantly, she had reignited a conversation around progressive hypocrisy and the necessity of self-policing within movements claiming to represent the people. Through it all, Crockett stayed consistent. She rejected offers to do fluff interviews. She skipped the red carpets and press circuits. Instead, she doubled down on her constituents, spending more time in community centers than in newsrooms. When asked during a town hall why she had gone so hard on Newsom, her answer was simple: because if we can't tell the truth to each other, how can we expect the people to trust us? I didn't sign up to be part of a club. I signed up to fight for change. That ethos resonated deeply, especially among young voters and communities of color who had grown disillusioned with mainstream Democratic leadership. They saw in Crockett not a politician playing the game, but a leader breaking the board. She was redefining what accountability looked like, not by attacking from the outside, but by confronting rot from within, and she wasn't afraid of the consequences. As midterm season loomed, the confrontation between Crockett and Newsom became a defining example of inter-party challenge, raising essential questions. Can the Democratic Party survive honest critique from within? Or will it continue to silence its boldest voices for the sake of false unity? Crockett had made her stance clear. Unity without truth is a lie, she said in a follow-up interview, and I won't be a part of that lie. The confrontation wasn't just a political flashpoint, it was a moral one. It forced voters, pundits, and policymakers alike to reckon with the limits of symbolism and the necessity of substance. Crockett had flipped the script. In doing so, she reminded America that leadership isn't about optics, it's about outcomes, and when those outcomes fail the people, it is not only appropriate but essential to call them out, especially when they come from within your own camp. If this moment moved you, if it made you think, or if you believe in speaking truth to power, no matter who that power belongs to, then make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications. Because this isn't just about one debate, it's about building a future where accountability, integrity, and justice aren't optional, they're expected. Let's keep this movement alive, together.